Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Another tranche of 211 million pounds or 82 billion naira being part of the seemingly never-ending Abacha loot will now be shared between Nigeria, the United States, and the British Overseas Dependency of Jersey, according to the pronouncement of a court in the United Kingdom. The case of $321 million handed over to the Nigerian government some time ago by the Swiss government with a series of preconditions for its disbursement is still fresh in public memory. With this latest development, questions are once again being asked as to whether or not the federal government has been honest, prudent, and transparent enough in spending or managing the repatriated funds for the greater good of the Nigerian people. For a detailed discussion on this, we're now being joined from our Arise Abuja studio by Professor Ofili Ugwudioha, Head of Department of Accounting, Nile University of Nigeria, Abuja. Welcome to the program, Prof. Good morning.
Yeah, how are you? Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much for coming to the morning show. Well, Prof, you must have listened to the introduction. I mean, Nigeria has been trying to recover looted funds and assets since the time of President Olusegun Obasanjo. And, you know, many Nigerians are concerned that this has not really, in the long run, translated into any significant development in Nigeria, particularly in terms of the management of the recovered loot and assets. What do you think is the problem? What are the challenges?
The challenges of usage of the funds or the challenges of repatriating the fund? Which of the challenges you are asking about?
Both. You know, both the management and the process of recovery from the international financial system especially.
Yeah, I will start with the process of recovery. You see, because of the corruption tag on Nigeria, and because of continuous exodus of our funds into foreign countries, then some countries tightened their economic policies against Nigeria. Actually, money laundering is an offense into any economy because it brings inflation into such a country. Well, if a country has gotten money that is not, that does not come through economic activities, in most cases, they confiscate such funds because it causes inflation. And if the owner then identifies and is able to clarify how the fund comes and why the fund should come in, well, that fund can be released. But in our own case, most of such funds are stolen funds from Nigerian economy. And once it comes in, they sit on it. And for you to actually use it there, you have to actually clarify how you got the funds. And if for one reason or the other, the federal government or whichever arm of the government that owns the money wants it, there's also a process of bringing it back. Because it's no longer your fund per se. It has come into another economy. Bringing it back has a stage of repatriation. And in the case of what we're looking at between Nigeria, US government, and Jersey Council of Jersey government is the normal process. The money left Nigeria to the United States and to a particular section, section of the United States. To get the money back, yes, it needs also legislation. I mean, the process, we look at the legislation in the state where it is domiciled. We look at the legislation in United States general, and again, how do we get it back? Then, because we already have a tag. In most cases, they give us very tough conditions on the release of such funds. Because we identify the fund. The fund is in somewhere. They have not used it. We want it back. How are we to assure those people? How are we to assure the United States government that if this one comes in, it will not be misused or it will not be stolen again? So these are the processes involved that have to be tidied up between the governments involved.
So once these conditions that have been imposed have been met, we now see how the money is spent. Well, last year, $322 million was recovered, and it was decided that this money would not be invested in infrastructure, but that it would be invested in conditional cash transfers of 5,000 naira monthly to the poorest Nigerians. This was without appropriation by the National Assembly. What is your comment on how the money has been applied by the federal government?
My comment is that for any fund to be spent in any nation, and in particular in our Nigerian nation, for any fund to be spent, it has to be appropriated in the appropriation bill. If such funds are spent, it is illegal spending. The problem, let me tell you, the problem is that sometimes the government may be wrongly advised. And it is difficult, even for somebody on top, to know whether the advice of his comrades are right or wrong. And they go ahead to implement. And you can only see the test of what you have done when it comes to the public. I don't understand how some people in MDAs and in government should advise the president that the fund that is not appropriated in the appropriation bill should be spent. Such funds can come in and be appropriated either in the next budget or in the supplementary budget of the same year. And again, why should we advise the government or advise the president to spend such funds on such areas that are questionable? If you think of that the magnitude of that money, around 82 billion, if you put such money into infrastructure, where the country is lacking infrastructure, we are lacking on roads, we are lacking on railways, we are lacking on electricity, and of course, we are lacking on security. If you put this fund into this within an accounting year, it will have great impact. Sharing money as an economic empowerment is not always the best because it's palliative. It doesn't solve the problem. The problem is still there. So the best way to solve economic problem is to take it from the root.
Absolutely, Professor.
The root of economic development is infrastructure and security. And once these things are there, all these boys, all these girls, all these people that are not employed will be employed. Because Nigeria is one of the best places to invest, if not because of lack of infrastructure and lack of security. And if these two things alone are addressed, people will get jobs because investors will come in. Because Nigeria has market, Nigeria has population, Nigeria has a lot of resources that people need to tap.
Absolutely, Professor. And what it seems like, seemingly, is that there's a certain level of economic colonization because beyond just the MDAs influencing the government or influencing the president on how to appropriate certain funds, we also have Bretton Woods institutions such as the World Bank. If we go back to Switzerland last year and the $321 million Abacha loot that was recovered, lest we forget that we did sign an MOU with Switzerland and the World Bank telling us exactly how to spend that money, which is when this idea of the 5,000 5,000 naira being given to the poorest homes came up. Now, the World Bank had an entire structure for this, yet we're speaking now and we're saying that this is not the right way to go about boosting your economy. We're living in a country with over 11,000 abandoned projects. What exactly is the way forward? Because we can't necessarily pump the money into new projects when we have abandoned projects. So how should the government start going about that, especially as we enter a new administration?
World Bank is advisory. World Bank's advice is just purely advisory. It is left for a government in which they are advising to take it or not. Conditional cash transfer is not the only thing World Bank advised Nigeria to do. There are so many advice they gave us that we didn't take because we know it's not good for our economy. And that money does not belong to the World Bank, so they cannot tell us how to use it. So I believe, as a finance person, that the best way to use such funds is to use it in the area that will empower the generality of the country. These people you are seeing, they are not poor because God made them poor. They are poor because they have been impoverished by the system. A system that does not have road, a system that does not have railway, a system that does not have adequate security, a system that does not have power to operate economic activities. That's the problem. That's our priority. And once all these things are there, these people you are feeding with 1 kobo, 2 kobo every day will now be able to feed themselves and also feed others.
Prof, yes, I'd like to take you back to the second leg of my earlier question, which is about transparency and accountability and the management of recovered loot and assets. Now, last year, President Buhari set up a committee on assets recovery, a 3-man panel, which did an audit of recovered loot and assets and put the figure at about 769 billion naira. In November 2018, the Minister of Information then, Alhaji Lai Mohammed, told Nigerians that government was preparing a register of recovered loot and assets. Up to now, we have not seen that register, which he promised will be made public. So the question arises, is there enough political will on the part of government to really track, looted funds and, stolen assets? In your view, is there enough political will? Hello?
I believe that the government has the political will to do that. It is totally different from what you are saying that the minister said. One thing is recovery of the funds. Another thing is, okay, how do we apply it and where does it go? And that's why I say that some of the people that advise the government, particularly the president, do not advise in the benefit of the generality of the people. You see, Nigeria is so diverse and so difficult to rule. Okay, whoever is making a political appointment or political appointments to people think, okay, these are the people that can drive my economy. But sometimes you go there, you see that some of these people are not doing what they should do. In reality, if there is if you recover looted funds, you have already published to the country that such money has been recovered, you are supposed actually to also lay bare to the nation what you have recovered, how you recovered it, and those that are pending, and also how you are using it. Because the problem is that sometimes some people in government will make statements without referring to those who should make that statement. Ordinarily, that statement made by the Minister of Information ordinarily should have been made by Minister of Finance, who knows when and how such things could be available. But I don't know, I'm not saying that anybody is wrong, but if I'm in government, that's what I will do. I will refer the matter to the person whose domain the subject matter is in his hands. So that's where we are having problem. Well, maybe
I want to present this argument to you for your consideration. Now, we've said there's been some resentment towards what Leila described as economic colonization. I like that term. There's been some resentment towards that, and that how the money was not appropriated properly and given to conditional cash transfers. Some people would say wasted on conditional cash transfers. And it should have been invested on infrastructure, as was done in the administration of former President Goodluck Jonathan, when we had the then finance minister, Nnamdi Usman, who said that the tranche of Abacha loot recovered then was devoted to 5 ministries, including power, water resources, and what have you. But did a scandal not occur with that same government when we had the coordinating minister, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, giving an allocation to the office of the NSA, Sambo Dasuki, of 61.4 billion naira of the Abacha loot, ostensibly to procure security, intelligence equipment to combat Boko Haram? We all know how that ended up. Is this not why we have been treated in this fashion, almost like children being told how to spend money that actually belongs to us? And is this not why, potentially, the ruling party, APC, decided, without recourse to the National Assembly or to anybody else, that the money should be spent by the federal government, and not even the 3 tiers of government, just by the federal government and just on the poorest families?
I'm not here to defend the action of APC or the action of PDP. What I feel as a finance person is that for funds to be expended, it has to be appropriated. That's what the Constitution of Federal Republic of Nigeria says. If Jonathan administration has done this, it is wrong. And of course, some of the people that put hands in the treasury where they should not have put are also being pursued and also arrested by this government. If anybody does it, this government has come in the second term, they could still be able to track some of their people that have done the same thing. So that's my belief, because for the fact that somebody make a mistake cannot make you continue making a mistake, because he did something wrong. And we cannot continue with wrong notion in administering the nation.
Just a point of correction, sorry, self-correction. Nnamdi Usman was under the PDP governor of government of President Obasanjo. She was the finance minister then, just to make that point.
Now, sir, let's take this further and let's actually speak about some strategy now. Tunun, do you want to come again? He said.
Oh, no, I just corrected myself that Nnamdi Usman was a finance minister under President Obasanjo, the PDP government of President Obasanjo, and not Goodluck Jonathan.
Now, sir, let's look at the strategy of this, because there's something quite ironic here. While we're being told how to spend our money like children, as Tundun rightly said, at the same time, Nigeria is the 8th largest recipient of aid in the world and the 2nd largest in Africa. Very ironic. Now, in terms of strategy going forward, we already know how much of an effect this has had on our foreign equity investments. What immediate action do we need to see? And do we need to see strategized transparently to the people in order for us to actually become a nation that is respected? Because it is quite humiliating that we are still being told in 2019 how to spend recovered loots from over 20 years ago.
No, please, can you come again with this question?
What strategy do we need to see implemented immediately in terms of us actually being able to run and function by ourselves without being told how to spend our money? Because ironically, while we are being told how to spend our money, we're still the 8th largest recipients of aid in the world, which is why we were recently described as Africa's money-losing machine by Forbes.
Well, the strategy I said before is that first, for you to expend any money from the income generated by the federal government through any means, it must pass through the National Assembly. Then, once it is appropriated, then you have to follow the implementation of the budget tenetly to ensure that you realize the purpose of the budget, the objective of the budget. And I always say that you cannot revive an economy by giving money to people. I'm always against it. Even with some state governors, I advise them, Instead of giving money to people and feeding those people on daily basis, empower them to be able to feed themselves. There are many ways we can empower our people. Agriculture is there. We have massive land. We are endowed with enough rainfall. We also have the massive water that we cannot manage for the advantage of agriculture. You can give soft loan to agriculturists and let them get the economy going through agriculture. You sieve them out of the rural system of agriculture using hoe and using machete as implement. Once agriculture is mechanized, mechanizing agriculture doesn't mean the magnified type of it. Small mechanization makes people comfortable doing farm work. That then you engage them in processing. If you empower them to process some of these agricultural products, our tomato, our yam, our cassava, these things that go rotting within a short period, you will see that the economy of the nation will boom. People will have job. People will have food to eat. Nobody will come and beg you to give him money in terms of conditional cash transfer. So that's the strategy. That's the only way. If we do any other thing, it's palliative, and it will stay, the problem will still be there.
Well, Prof, we'll go on a short commercial break, but just before then, let me ask you this question. Talking about the budget, last year, President Buhari said the recovered funds, about 769 billion naira, will be used to fund the 2019 budget. But there are still concerns about, monitoring the use of those funds. There is even an NGO project called the Monitoring of Recovered Assets Nigeria Project, which is funded by the Department for International Development, DFID. But how do we as citizens, how do we monitor the proper use, the proper deployment of those recovered funds?
Well, let me come in here. You see, if government recovers money and use the money to fund a budget, in monitoring such a fund is no longer monitoring the fund, that single fund alone, because it has already gone into other revenues of the government. So it is now, how do we monitor the budget implementation? Because once it has gone into the budget, is appropriated into one sector of the economy to be used, now the monitoring and execution are jointly done by the executive and the legislature. The executive does the execution of the project. The legislature now monitor the implementation. But the problem I have with monitoring of Nigerian budget is that budget execution, by our own interpretation, is only how much we have expended out of the budgeted funds, and not how much activities we have been able to generate with the budgeted funds. I always say that this is wrong. From time immemorial, from different governments, I've been saying it. Nigerians are much more interested, okay, they have executed budget up to 80% because fund have been assessed up to 20%. And if they can't assess that fund, budget was not implemented. It's wrong. Those budgetary items are meant for execution of certain economic activities. Have we ever one day measured the economic activities carried out in any budget after the budget year and see how it impacts on the people, whether we actually achieve the objective of the budget? No, we have not. People only talk assessing the funds, not executing the activities. Activities may not necessarily be road project. There are too many activities. We have activities to be carried in our health sector, activities to be carried in our road sector, in our railway, in aviation. Have we now, from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, measured the activities and told the public this is what we have done? No. So that's the problem. The monitoring is actually not very effective because most of our people do monitoring to say we have assessed 80%, we have assessed 90%. So the budget implementation is good, but it's not true. Well, it's really not true because in most cases the fund assessed is always not in line with the activities carried out.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Ugwudioha, for coming to the morning show. We're very grateful to you. Thank you very much indeed. Tundu and Leila. I mean, I kept going on and on about this point about transparency and accountability and monitoring, because the biggest concern of many Nigerians is that, look, all these recovered funds and assets could again be relooted,
which has been the accusation.
Could end up in wrong hands. And hence you have some NGOs, you have international agencies like DFID trying to encourage Nigerians to monitor how the money is spent. But why is this such a big problem in Nigeria? Is it all about corruption? After all, in the Philippines, you know, there was the same process of recovery of funds and assets from the Marcos regime. Yes. You know, and the Filipinos, you know, the Philippine government seem to have done a better job, you know, in terms of transparency and accountability.
Because I think the issue, which we touched on yesterday briefly, apart from recovery or repatriation, whatever we're talking about, there needs to be punishment. There needs to be some kind of sanction against people. You have General Abdul Salami, when he took over from Abacha, when Abacha died, recovered $600 million and 120 million pounds from an individual who was a representative of the Abacha family. That individual, yes, he went on to become a senator and then a governor. In what universe is this allowed to happen? President Obasanjo struck a deal with the Abacha family and said, you can have $100 million in cash, and I think it was $300 million in bonds, and you, Mohamed Abacha, get to walk free from the allegations of murdering Kudirat Abiola. In what universe? So this is why we are treated the way we are treated.
Well, I mean, some people in response to that have said that we need to strengthen legislation. And there was, before the National Assembly, the Proceeds of Crimes Bill.
I'm excited by that.
Yes, but that has not been passed. And maybe, you know, if that bill is passed into law, it may help. However, the thing is not about, you know, passing a law. There are many laws in our statute books that are just dead laws because they are not implemented. It is for government to have the political will, you know, to apply those laws, even beyond whatever is in the statute books at the moment. And then the other concern that I see here is that if you look at the history of money purportedly looted by Abacha, the Abacha government, these were direct money taken directly from the CBA.
Central Bank.
How do we strengthen the central bank to ensure its independence? That, you know, the head of state cannot just order the CBN governor and say, bring me 5 bags of Nigerian money. Yeah. I think that's also a problem.
Absolutely.
That's insane.
Anyway, we'll take a short break now.